Hi there, everybody. Today, I'm going to share some research with you related to geopathic stress, which is a reaction to something called geopathic zones, a biological reaction to geopathic zones, and cancer. And there is quite a bit of research on this, and I recently kind of upgraded my knowledge on the amount of research that is actually out there. And I was so amazed at how many studies have been done that I feel compelled to share it. And because I have a background in investigating geopathic zones and myself have dealt with my fair share of geopathic stress and how to remedy those situations, I just know how important this issue is. I just had no idea, again, how much research had actually been done, scientific research had actually been done that connects geopathic stress and cancer. So I'm going to share some of that with you today. If you personally have cancer at this moment, or you know someone who has cancer that you'd like to help maybe mitigate circumstances that might be aggravating that situation, or you just simply want to minimize the risk of cancer, I hope you'll watch the video all the way through. So it begins with some research by a guy. We'll go back to 1929, and there was this doctor named Gustav von Pohl in Germany. And he was not only an MD, but he was also a dowser. And he had been exposed to information about other research that had been done that was linking or suggesting the probability that cancer might have some relationship to location, to where people were living. And so he was familiar with the idea of noxious earth currents. And so he took it upon himself to do some dowsing of to find all the water, underground water streams, subterranean water veins in this town in Germany, and where he was basically looking for anything of significance that was within 40 to 50 meters underground, and that was at least 3 to 4 meters wide. And he mapped this whole little town. It was called Vilsbiburg, Germany. And then what he did is he got the records, met with the appropriate people, got the records on the cancer deaths in the area over a certain period of time. And he investigated 54 cancer death locations where the people had lived, where their beds were located in their homes, that type of thing, and found that in all these cases, that the home, and more importantly, in most cases, the bed itself where the cancer patient was right over these subterranean water veins. And so he had no idea where the cancer patients were located. It was a great study because he did all the dowsing first of where the veins were, found those first, and then went and got the information on where were the cancer deaths, overlaid those locations on the vein map, and found there was a direct correlation in all cases with underground water. And underground water is known by geomancers, people who work with earth energies, to be a major cause of, there are many other causes, but underground water is certainly recognized as a major cause of these geopathic zones where it's an unhealthy situation. There's a problem with underground water when it's great for the earth and everything like that, but when it runs right under an area where you're spending a lot of time, there's been lots of, and I'll go over some other research, but there's a difference in the electromagnetic quality above the water. Everything from shifts in the ionization, the number of ions that are in the atmosphere directly above the water, to subtle changes in the magnetic fields directly above the water. We're electromagnetic beings. Every little cell we've got in our body is a little mini magnet. And so when we're exposed to environments where there are fluctuations that are outside of the norm that sponsors health in the human body, that can create a problem. And this was just the start of research that was demonstrating that, wow, we see the this big correlation. 54 people, it's not that many, but it was a beginning. He went on to investigate another 11 cases within the next 18 months and found the same correlation, that there was the people who had died of cancer were sleeping right above underground water veins. So in 1960, a guy named Jacob Strangle actually replicated his studies, Dr. Van Poel's studies. And in this case, he used something called a geomagnetometer. I think that's how you say it, but this is a machine that is very sensitive to measuring magnetic fields. And he was actually able to verify with a machine, not just using dowsing, but with a machine that can measure slight fluctuations in magnetic fields, that all of Van Poel's findings were actually accurate. So that was very interesting. So another study by a guy named Dr. Hager, again, this guy was in Germany. The Germans have been involved for many decades in serious dowsing stuff, taking dowsing much more seriously than perhaps it's taken in other countries in the world. And as a result of knowing how to use dowsing to find different things, especially underground water, that skill was used heavily in some of this research. So here is Dr. Hager, and he investigated, interestingly, 5,348 people who died of cancer over a 21-year period. And found that in, again, all cases found strong earth currents and an underground water stream intersecting under their houses. So 5,000 cases. So that was another one. Dr. Hans Nieper, this goes on also from Germany, concluded he's a world-renowned cancer specialist and heads one of the, I don't know if he still does, but at one time headed one of the largest cancer clinics and research centers in the world, concluded that 75% of his multiple sclerosis patients and 93% of his cancer patients were living in geopathic zones. We're living in areas where there is this geopathic stress and reacting accordingly. In the 1940s, a guy named Pierre Cody in Le Havre, France, used an electrometer. He was measuring the ionization in the atmosphere. So I'm assuming what that means, an electrometer, was that he was using an ion counter, and those do exist, and you can in fact measure the ionization and fluctuations in the ionization with these machines. So he used what was probably an ion counter to measure air ionization concentrations in cellars in underground basement areas underlaying 7,000 cancer beds. So these were places where people had, gone through their cancer period, where many of them probably died in these beds, but bottom line, where people were sleeping, where they were sick, et cetera, is 7,000 cancer beds in the homes of people who had died of cancer. The ion concentration in the cellars in the spots directly under those beds was 10 times or more higher than the ion concentration in the surrounding environment in the cellar. And he was able to verify that these ion concentrations, they can actually create almost like a ray of energy, of atmosphere that is heavily dosed with that is heavily ionized, that can run in a vertical, and this is measurable with the proper equipment, that runs vertically up and can go right through the floor. So very, very interesting. So anyway, that was his study. Another really fascinating study, and there are many more, but another fascinating study that I thought was one in 1994 by a number of researchers, Andreas Kopschina, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, and Wolfgang and Ursula Dunn. Again, this was in Germany. Investigated 8,200. So we're talking studies of significance here. 8,200 patients measured. They basically were doing a study where they wanted to measure the patient's ability to heal, regardless from cancer, regardless of therapy that they were using, whatever type of modality they were using. It could be mainstream, it could be alternative, whatever, what their ability to actually respond positively to the therapy and heal was. They found that 34% of the people who they investigated these were cancer cases, were in geopathic zones. They were living in geopathic areas, whether underground water was causing that or something else. They were basically experiencing geopathic stress. And again, underground water is only one of the things that can cause a biological reaction and create these things called geopathic zones. You have fault lines, underlying earth fractures and fault lines. You can have mineral deposits. You can have a lot of other things that, I've studied over the years. I've been involved in this field for over 30 years because of my direct physical reaction to geopathic zones in the first home that I bought in Sedona. And it was significant and severe. It took me a long time to figure out, but it ended up that there were significant, and still are, significant geopathic problems at the little first home that I bought in Sedona. Most of that has been remedied, but not all of that has been remedied because as you'll find if you get training on this stuff, that not all geopathic situations can be remedied. As much as everybody would like to hope that that's true, it's not. Sometimes you just simply have to move if there's a big enough problem that cannot be addressed, and the cause of the problem is something that actually can't be changed. So anyway, bottom line, here's what these people found, that 34% of the patients actually had geopathic stress was going on. So they were in locations where their bodies were being stressed out from geopathic zones, and their ability to heal was significantly affected. So they found with these people who were exposed to geopathic zones that unless you moved them out of the geopathic zone, if you remove them from that exposure, they flat out wouldn't heal. So I found that study very, very interesting, that when they were moved out of the geopathic zones, that their therapies began actually working. And so anyway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Another one that was very, very fascinating. This guy, Dr. Rambo, MD, he was again from Germany. There is research elsewhere, like you saw France. I'm going to tell you about one from India as we conclude this. But Professor Rambo, he's just a medical doctor, MD. He was the president of the Chamber of Medicine in Marsburg, Germany. He, for 3 years, investigated cancer patients that were living in geopathic stress areas. He failed over 3 years to find a single cancer patient who was not living in one of these zones. So there you have it. The last study was one that I read just the other day. It's a study from India. And they were looking at doing heart rate studies, studying the impact on heart rate. And there have been other studies done, and I have read them somewhere. And I know that I do that periodically. I've tested myself for heart rate fluctuations in and out of geopathic zones just to replicate those experiments that others have done. I've tested my blood pressure, same thing. It's quite extraordinary what happens to heart rate and blood pressure when you're in a geopathic zone, and you can test yourself and see this for yourself. But they did a study in India where they verified, this was with hospital workers, and they verified heart rate increases, significant heart rate increases in geopathic zones. What was also fascinating about they did another study, which was very fascinating, and that is that they found that there was a significant increase in mechanical failures. So like equipment, like office equipment, industrial equipment, automobiles, equipment, mechanical equipment, a significant increase in like 57%. It was a significant increase in mechanical failures. So something going wrong with the machine when the machine spent extended time periods in a geopathic zone. So that I found absolutely amazing, and makes me wonder about my one little car that I parked in. Its regular parking place was in the garage here at my little property that had all those other, geopathic problems. I know for a fact there's an underground water stream that runs under that garage. And I've had just this, ongoing little mechanical problems with that car. So it's kind of amusing to me to read this particular study. In regards to heart rate, I have verified multiple times with myself that how you do it is you find, if you have a heart monitor, you can get them. They're not very expensive these days to get, just a little digital heart rate monitor, blood pressure monitor, but you can find in your environment, use a simple dowsing rod, to find a zone, or you can use muscle testing. A fun little experiment is you can take a book, like some kind of heavy book, like an encyclopedia, and you can walk around your house and you can just be lifting the book like this, or your yard, and just periodically lift the book, walk, 5 feet, lift the book, walk another 5 feet, lift the book, take a little rest so you don't tire yourself out. And when you're over an underground water stream, or when you're over another type, or entering, not all geopathic stress is caused from something underground. There are a lot of above ground things that can cause it. But this is a fun experiment that anybody can do. When you're in a geopathic zone, you will just lose your strength. It's phenomenal how fast it happens. So you're lifting a book that's really easy for you to lift up in the air, and you walk into a geopathic zone and you try to lift that, and it's like someone has loaded 10 books on top of the one book that you've got. Fascinating experiment. You should try it. I learned it from this master dowser many years ago, probably 20 years ago now, named Bob McCusick. He's this really interesting inventor, and has invented all kinds of products to help with geopathic stress and electro stress and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, try that. But on my experiments with myself, using a digital meter to measure my blood pressure, when I'm in a healthy zone on my property, my blood pressure will be 68, maybe upwards to 70, 72, something like that as a resting heart rate. If I go and do the same reading, and I just rest to make sure that I'm haven't stressed myself out or anything, I do it within the same basic time frame, I move into a geopathic zone. Within a matter of a minute or two, certainly no more than 5 minutes, my heart rate will shoot well over 90, 95, that rapidly, just going in. And this is resting heart rate in a geopathic zone. So you can see why sleeping in a geopathic zone, blood pressure will also go up by many points as well. So you can see these are indicators of overall stress on the body when your heart is having to work that hard to support the body, just because of where you are situated. And I can certainly see how over an extended period of time, if you were having that kind of exposure nonstop all the time, 8-9 hours a night from where you're sleeping, even though I will tell you that when you're sleeping in a geopathic zone, one of the common symptoms is insomnia. Doesn't happen to everybody, but it's a very, very common symptom. So maybe you're not sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night. But imagine if you were sleeping that length of time, that kind of stress, just that kind of simple measurable stress with heart rate and blood pressure, I can see how that could lead slowly to a breakdown of the immune system and ultimately possibly cancer, or certainly help put the body in a situation where it wasn't responding effectively to something like cancer, severe thing like that. Now, other diseases have certainly been linked to exposure to geopathic zones, and no doctors are claiming that geopathic zones are the root cause of the problem, but they're saying that there is this correlation between location and the quality of the environment and cancer. And so just, it might be just, again, putting too much stress on the body where it overloads it. And if the person perhaps has a propensity towards cancer anyway. And now they're in a situation where their body cannot effectively respond with a healing response. So anyway, I found it all fascinating. This is just a sampling of some of the studies that I've reviewed, and I think there are need to know studies. If you do have cancer, if you know someone who has cancer, if you want to minimize the risk of cancer, just based on what I told you today, it would behoove you to learn more about geopathic zones and where they are. Do you have any geopathic zones in your living environment? If you do, sometimes it can be just as simple if you can find where the problem is. Sometimes it can be as basic and simple as simply moving your furniture around where you're outside the main stress zones. Sometimes it's not that simple. And again, underground water and underground fault lines would be another major player, are not always the cause of geopathic stress. And there are actually other remedies. There are things you can do to damp down the impact of what the underground water is doing in the atmosphere. You can do things, although it's more difficult with fault lines. Moving out of the way is usually the very best strategy with underground fault lines. But anyway, enough of that. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of training here. I announced earlier, I think it was 4 days ago, I announced my one of my Keep Forever video collections. As many of you know, I am retiring this year from any live training, and I won't be selling much of my recorded or offering for one-time views, that type of thing, like I've done for years. I'm moving in a whole different direction that's really going to take all my attention. So I'm going to keep a very small cluster of videos available to the public on developing your intuition, some of those basics, but everything else is not going to be available. And I happen to have just a huge inventory of really excellent training on what I'm talking about right here on managing geopathic stress and other environmental energies. Like, when a lot of these studies were done, this was way before we were being bombarded with all this electromagnetics, the electrical stuff, the radio frequencies from cell towers, from smartphones, from all that kind of stuff. So now we have a double dose of, and of course there's, in that arena, there's tons of links already with research being done showing an increase in cancer due to those kind of exposures. So we've got geopathic stress in environments. Now we've got the electro stuff causing electro stress in the environments, and everybody is really being hit hard by all of this. So I've got just this Keep Forever package that I put together. These are videos that you get to actually keep literally forever. They're on USB drives, so you don't have to use wireless on your computer, your smartphone, or whatever to watch them. You can watch them radiation free and hopefully outside of a geopathic zone after you learn more about what those are all about. Or if you're already a long-term student of mine, you can refresh your memory on how to deal with all this stuff. But I think there's 30 videos, 28, 30 videos that I've included in this package. It's absolutely excellent training. I learned, my education in geopathic stress really came from buying the house in Sedona, as I mentioned before, and finding that there was a significant geopathic stress problem. At the time, I knew absolutely nothing about this topic area, nothing. But I just started, as soon as I bought the house and moved in, I started just developing all kinds of wild symptoms. I started having major body aches. I had developed insomnia for the first time in my life. I was having minor headaches. That wasn't a major problem, but some minor headaches, nausea, just mood swings, fuzzy brain, just totally unlike me. I mean, I was such a healthy person prior to moving into the house. And I already knew how to dowse, and I had read over the years I remember reading about these things called black streams that can sometimes run under houses and make people sick. And I just thought, wow, I wonder if maybe I have one of those black streams running under the house. So I got out my dowsing rod and I just gave my body the command that I just want a response like this. I just want the rod to respond when my body enters a life depleting zone, energy zone of any type. I want a response like this. And whether it's, one of these underground water streams or something I don't even understand, I want a response like this. So I start walking around the perimeter of my property, no exaggeration, probably every 10 feet, there was a response. And I went, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? And this house was just today it's not that, because many remedies have been done. There are still some problems, but the house overall, the property overall is pretty clean. But it was just truly a nightmarish situation, and it became my laboratory. And so through trial and error, going to dowsing conferences, learning from other dowsers, reading books, but mainly trial and error with myself, trying to remedy my own situation, and then going on a few years later to actually do space management consultation, helping people remedy in geopathic zones, electromagnetic situations. I did that for almost 12, something like that, 12, 15 years. So I've worked with, gosh, thousands of cases, and my own situation. I have just a huge amount of background in this subject, and that the cream of the crop knowledge that I've got has been loaded into those training programs. The geopathic zones, 20 common causes and cures of geopathic stress is an excellent program. It's an older program. I recorded it in 2013, but it's absolutely timeless information and incredibly valuable. In 2018, I did a nice update on some other things that are going on right now that are wild and weird, but they fall into the category of certainly environmental energy situations that can cause significant stress on the body. And then in 2019, I did another significant update. I think that one's 3 hours of training. And so the whole package in regards to geopathic stress really brings you up to speed to right now, things that are going on and age-old things that are problematic when it comes to geopathic stress. So I hope that you will take a really good look at that program and ideally purchase that program for yourself, especially if you've got any health concerns, or you do want to just really load your basket of tools of staying healthy in the years ahead. I think you need to know this information. I don't think you're going to find better training anywhere. So there you have it. Take a look at the program, and hope what you learned today was helpful. You can go onto the internet and do some of your own research. Again, there's a lot more research on this subject than what I shared with you. A good place that you might want to start, they're the ones that published the it was an interesting organization called the Natural Science naturalsciencemedicine.com and swissharmony.com. They're the ones that published the detailed study on the investigating the cancer situations where they tested people's ability to heal regardless of what therapy they were using, and found that unless those people of the sampling that they did that were in geopathic zones, unless those people were moved out of geopathic zones, they simply did not get significant responses from the therapies they were using. So I found that study very, very interesting. So check it out. That's it for today. Have a nice weekend. Bye for now.